Hi everyone, my name is Molly, and I'm a film scholar specialized in Korean cinema, especially in the 1970s and 80s. I'm teaching at the University of Suwon right now, and I've been teaching mostly Korean cinema or sometimes Korean filmmakers. And first of all, I'm very happy to talk about something I have passion for, like this one. This is we'll be talking about film and actually films made by women and female women filmmakers. And I thank you for Leanne for giving me this precious opportunity, I guess. And I particularly chose to talk about this subject among many others. The history of female filmmakers in Korean cinema, because this is something that I think it's really important for us to think about how heavily male predominant Korean film industry has been and still is, while it is considered the most successful film industry in the world. I also want to talk about what kind of changes, positive changes that we are going through despite such unequal gender distribution in the field. Before I get to that, I felt a need for give you a little, history of female filmmakers in Korean cinema, sort of historical account of Korean female filmmakers. So I would say maybe this is about genealogy of Korean women filmmakers, and then we'll be talking about how things are right now. Okay. Next slide. This is Bang Namok, and this is Hong Eun-won, and I'll talk about Bang Namok first. She's knowingly one of the very first female filmmakers in the history of Korean cinema. And generally, he's the first and the pioneer of as a woman filmmaker. She was born in 1923, and she grew up as a huge movie fan. And as soon as Korea got liberated, she was able to get a job as staff member for many movie projects. And at the end of Korean War, she decided to make her own movie. But then she was not able to get a funding from anywhere because, obviously she wasn't really famous. And back then, there was no notion of female filmmakers. It's generally men's job. So she had to secure the money from her own sister. So she founded her own film company called 자매 영화사, sister film company, and then the funds mostly came from her older sister. And then it's called The Widow, 미망인, a film about the war widows. At the time of Korean film industry, there was no proper production system, so Park relied on the help of her colleagues to complete her 16mm fiction film. Scripter and the light people and the cameraman, so on. Unfortunately, it didn't stay in the theater. I think it was played only for 4 days because it didn't really do well on the box office. But I think the film is an excellent work about women and the crossroads between tradition and modernity, portraying heroines torn between motherhood and sexual desire. I'm not just one, and there are so many other film critics that highly value this film. But more unfortunate thing is Park decided to stop filmmaking. Maybe she was hurt by the result of her very first film, or maybe she sort of lost her passion for filmmaking as a whole because, not many people were willing to help her out. But obviously, that's what she needed the most if she wanted to go on as a filmmaker. She needed to have staff, but it wasn't really possible as a female filmmaker. So Park did not make any other movies after, but her film was played at the very first Seoul Women's Film Festival, Seoul International Women Film Festival. I think that was 1997 or 8. They sort of found this film and then restored digitally, and then they had this very first public viewing. Ever since her film was sort of stopped by theatrical release in 1956. And Hong Eun-won, right next to her. Oh my God! Actually, I have a slide for this whole content that I just delivered. Next slide. This is the whole thing that I just said. And I think I'm gonna send my PPT to Leanne so you can click on the link and you can see the whole movie. And I think some of the shots were lost. So it's not like perfect film, but you still get the, gist, what's going on. And the link, it's provided by KOFA, Korean Film Archive, and they have so many classical Korean films for free. So you can find them, Korean Film Archive on YouTube, and then, they probably provide English subtitles for most of films, most of classical Korean films. So you can check that. Next slide. And this is Hong Eun-won. Actually, she was a really good friend of Bang Nam-ok's. But then she sort of debuted later, a little bit later than Bang Nam-ok did. She came into the film industry during the same period as Park did. And after working as an assistant director and screenwriter for 15 years, that's a pretty long time, right? I mean, that makes what Hong Eun-won different from Bang Nam-ok, because Bang Nam-ok didn't have that much of filmmaking training. But then she spends 15 years only for training under other projects. And then finally, she debuted as a director with her film called The Female Judge. Oh, it's called A Woman Judge, which came out in 1962. It's a story about the death of female judge, Hwang Yun-seok. Actually, it's a real-life event. It was a sensational news event at that time. It shows the heroine as an intellectual woman who tries to juggle her family and her job and portrays the various roles of a woman. And the real incident was Hwang Yun-seok actually was murdered by her own husband and mother-in-law. But then Hong Eun-won didn't make that as thriller. She changed the whole story, the real story, into sort of like family drama. So in her movie, nobody dies. There is only this concept of female judge, and of course there is a happy ending. She starts out like struggling female judge, but then she gets along with her husband and her in-laws all together pretty well. The good thing is Hong didn't stop there. She kept making her films. She also directed The Single Mom, Horamoni, which came out in 1964, and What Misunderstanding Left Behind. 오해가 남긴 것, which came out in 1966. So I think based on her filmography, it's pretty obvious that she was pretty prolific. You know, her movie came out every other years, every other year. And the wife of this is 신상옥's wife, actually, 최은희, hugely popular actress of 1960s. And as I just said, she's the wife of 신상옥, one of the most like respected movie director of 1960s and 70s. She made The Girl Raised as a Future Daughter-in-Law. I think it's called 민며느리. It's pretty simple in Korean title. I don't know why they made it so long. And One-Sided Love of Princess. I think it's called 공주의 사랑 or something like that. I'm forgetting. Through Shinfilm, which is the company of her husband's production company. And I mean, obviously, she's one of those early female filmmakers. I wouldn't skip that. Her career as not just as a movie actress, but as a filmmaker. But I think she must be regarded differently from other, first generation female filmmakers, because she never really wanted to direct films. It was her husband's will that, I think it's gonna go for you if you knew how to make film. That was Shin Sang-ok's idea, not hers. And I don't know whether she enjoyed it or not, but she never really continued filmmaking. So I think the path should be viewed differently. Next slide. And this is called 첫 경험, first experience. And we don't have the actual movie poster. I think it's a publicity photo for some newspaper at the time. And the director is called Hwang Hemi. She's like, so to speak, second generation of women filmmakers of Korean cinema. And unfortunately, we don't have the actual film. We only have scenario. I think they lost it somehow, and then the Korean Film Archive, they only have scenario, the written work of the film. So we can't really watch that. That's very unfortunate, but it's really, interesting to see this filmmaker, Hwang Hemi, because she's from France. She came from France from her study with her husband, and then she sort of settled in Korean film industry. And I think she, not just directing, she did some production work too. She produced The Mist, 안개, directed by Kim Soo-young, and the movie it's one of the most, I don't know, it's always considered one of the most outstanding films of 1960s. And she produced that, and I think that makes her as the very first female producer as well. So her career is a bit more interesting than others. And because I couldn't see the film, and I can't really explain how good it is or what's interesting about this film, but it's about I only know the story. It's about a woman who sort of likes to explore relationship. So it's about an adult woman's sexual experience. And Hwang Hemi wrote the story, and then she directed it, and pretty much she did everything by herself. And she was also the producer of this film. So I know this director, Lee Do-young. I think you probably know him by 뽕, Mulberry, and The Last Witness, 최후의 증인. He was huge as well in the 1970s and 80s. And when I met Lee Do-young 감독님, I asked him, have you seen Hwang Hemi's first experience when you were in the 60s, when you were working in the 60s and 70s actually? And he answered me he said, "Oh, this was incredible film. The story was so interesting, and the cinematography was excellent, and the composition of the shot and mise en scène, and the narrative, all the elements of the film was so well orchestrated, and it was so, I don't know, like really good film." But I don't know if he said that for the sense of like this is the best film of the 1970s, or if he was saying that this is good film for a filmmaker. I wasn't really sure that when I had a talk with him. But I think it's good enough for us to regard this film as pretty well made film, a film with good quality. Like I said, the film dealt with pretty, sensational topic as, sexual experience of female protagonist. And it really challenged the sexual norms and tradition, because it wasn't really a popular topic for Korean cinema, talking about female sexuality. It was especially unmarried, that of unmarried women. It was sort of like big taboo, I guess. But still, so the copy says 이것이 실화냐? Is this a real story? And I think they try to marketize this topic of female sexuality. And unlike her predecessors, Hwang is from the generation that received Western, education, and their sensitivity was influenced by Western culture, Western youth culture of the 1950s and 60s. And Hwang joined the film industry as a producer of The Mist, like I said, and I highly recommend you watch that film as well, Mist, directed by Kim Soo-young. I think it came out in 1967. Next slide, please. And I think this is pretty important event for this, history of Korean women filmmakers, because in the 1970s, we only have one female filmmakers like at work, and that was after sort of Hong Eun stopped her film career. She left filmmaking because, according to her, I shouldn't say autobiography, because it was from some article, newspaper articles. Hong Eun said she had to leave film industry because sexual harassment and all this like gender inequality was just too much for her. So she leaves, and then Hwang Hae-mi comes in. So Hwang Hae-mi was the only working female filmmaker in the 1970s. And I think it's pretty, impressive to see this emergence of female film people community. In the 1970s, leading female directors, Han-ok, we don't have record of Han-ok, so we don't know what kind of films she made and how many films she made. So it's kind of hard to find. But according to the history of Kaido Club, let me see. 한순애, 이정희, there are few people working in the industry, and according to Korean film scholar Moon Kwan-gyu, Kaido Club touched off a radical movement in the form of experimental movies. I think that's why it's so difficult to track down their films, because they're all experimental films, not commercial cinema. And which was a women's challenge to masculinity and popular movie that dominated Chumulo. And Kaido participated in the youth of the 1970s with their films. And to be a leader of youth culture film movement, Kaido film aligned with Yoo Hyun-mo, who was leading many artistic film clubs and societies. And Yoo Hyun-mok, along with Shin Sang-ho, is one of the biggest figure, one of the biggest filmmakers in the 1960s. And I think Yoo Hyun-mok was a professor of film department of Dongguk University. He taught there many years before he passed away. And I think he, not just this one, Kaido Club, but he led many sort of like avant-garde and artistic experimental film clubs and movements. Moving on to 1980s and 90s, we finally get to witness two female filmmakers, not just one. So I think it's a good thing, although it's a little bit depressing. However, ironically, even after this like systemized collective attempt to unite and make their own film circle, like Kaido Club, there were very few female directors until Korean cinema made a new leap forward in the mid-1990s. Female directors such as Hong Eun-won and Hwang Hae-mi were either labeled the only female director and used in marketing strategies where the scarcity of female directors was emphasized, or else treated as supporting staff for male directors. And on top, there's Lee Mi-rae. She was the only female filmmaker of theatrically released fictional features throughout the 1980s. I mean, Im Sul-ye came in when Lee Mi-rae was working, but then I think she only made short film back then. Lee Mi-rae debuted with My Daughter Rescued from the Swamp, 수렁에서 건져냈다. It's a film about juvenile delinquency. And I think she made total of 6 films, and most of the 6 movies she directed, including Cabbage in the Pepper Field and 영심이, featured the lives of teenage girls and boys or college students. And so it's pretty fair to say Lee Mi-rae was specialized in this kind of youth films. And I think I read her interview that she hated that. She hated to only focus on youth films or comedy films with teenagers. But that's what the production company wanted from her. And they didn't really give her other opportunities. So as others did, Lee Mi-rae stopped filmmaking altogether after her 6 films behind. And then all of a sudden she decides to become a restaurant owner. So she opens her restaurant, 여자만, in Insadong. You should go there. It's still there. 여자만 was open so many years ago, but it's still there. And I don't know whether it's a good thing or not for Lee Mi-rae 감독님 as a filmmaker, because the restaurant was a big hit. It became hugely popular restaurant, and then now it's been franchised. So there's not only just 여자만 in Insadong, but actually it's everywhere. I think there's one in Ilsan and in Jamshir or somewhere. So you should look it up, and then maybe you should try one of those Lee Mi-rae's restaurants. I think I visited there once. It's specialized in 전라남도 음식, 전라도 음식, food from Jeolla province. And then let's talk about Im Sul-ye. In the 1990s, the new changes in the Korean film industry, Korean film production system arose, and women were active in filmmaking. I mean, producing, PR and marketing. So there were more, female force. There was more female force started coming in to the industry. And there were several reasons why, but one of the reasons how this happened because more and more schools started to have film departments. And then there's a big film a school called CAFA was established by Korean government. So there are more film, of course, it's easy to produce more, film professionals that way rather than finding them from the fields directly. So from that point, people didn't really have to go through this, dreadfully hard apprenticeship under the well-known film directors. Sometimes, like, Hong Eun-won, she spent 15 years working under some, famous female director. But that wasn't really a process anymore. People just, could go to film school, and then they have their own training from school, and then that was it. So I think that would make, easier for them to start their career. New talent was introduced through short film awards at various film festivals. Many specialized film training courses were provided, and it became possible to debut as a feature film director without having, first served as an apprentice for a long time in the male-dominated network, as I mentioned. And Im Sul-ye, I think her major was not film major though. She went to Hanyang University, but then her major was French or something. And then she went to France to study film. So she actually had this film training outside of Korea. And she won an award at the Seoul Short Film Festival with her very first short feature, Promenade in the Rain, 우중 산책, in 1994, and presented her feature film, Three Friends, in 1996, which launched the new generation of female directors influenced by the Korean New Wave. And I want to emphasize the fact that how good 우중 산책 was to me. I found out, actually, I saw the film pretty late. I didn't watch it when it was, available for watching. Actually, I found out about the film about 2 years ago, and then I think I saw it last year through this streaming service called Purple Watch. It's a streaming service designed for female audiences and female filmmakers, basically. I mean, it's not really strictly for them, but, mostly. So they stream films made by women filmmakers only, long and short features. So you can find 우중 산책 by Im Sul-ye there, because mostly it's really hard to watch short films online. I highly recommend that. She got outstanding reviews for her first short feature and the long one, the debut movie as well. And then she also received outstanding fanatic reviews for Waikiki Brothers, which is her second film. And it's a story about a band, like, sort of like washed up band. And it portrays their journey throughout the country. In 2003, she directs this film, this short film, which becomes a part of this omnibus film project as a human rights film project. And it's called If You Are Me. And then I think she has joined several, human rights film projects like that one. In that short film, I think, I remember she talks about a girl who goes through eating disorder. In reality, Im herself is an activist. She's a founder of CARA, Korean Animal Rights Advocates. And I think many of you must have seen her latest film, which came out last year, Little Forest. It's a remake of Japanese film, but about I think the title is same as well. It's also called Little Forest. It's about a girl moving to countryside from Seoul and make her own living by farming and growing livestock. Next slide, please. This is 질투는 나의 힘. It's Jealousy is my middle name. That's English title, pretty interesting. And it's directed by Park Chan-wook. And this here, it's 미술관역 동물원. Art Museum by the Zoo, which is directed by Lee Jung-hyang. So finally, we start to see female directors in multiple numbers. Park Chan-wook won attention with her short film To Be in 1996, and then Heavy in 1998, and then made her debut film with Jealousy is My Middle Name. And this guy on the left is Park Hae. I think you probably know him as in, what's famous? Oh, Memoirs of Murderer, Bong Joon-ho's film. He sort of stars as a killer or not, like mysterious role he's taking in that film. And I think this is a sort of melodrama, and this is totally melodrama. And especially Lee Jung-hyang's film was pretty good in terms of box office. And one of her biggest hits was The Way Home, 집으로. And it made a lot of money, fortunately. Because, selling tickets is pretty important thing, especially in the movie industry, that's inevitable. So it's really good that you make good films, that good film that receives good critical reviews from film critics or whatever. That's important. But more important thing is, I think, in order to survive and in order to maintain as a filmmaker, it's really important to, expose your film to public, I guess. Next slide, please. And this is not exactly about female filmmakers per se, but I want to talk a little bit about this movement called 바리테오. The spread of feminism and documentary film. Oh, that's a topic for this slide. In 1989, 바리테오, an independent film production group, appeared with the purpose of producing feminist films. And 변영주, I think she's pretty, well known for many film audiences, I think, even outside of Korea. She's well known for her film Helpless, 화차, and she participated and acted as cinematographer on Even Little Grass Has Its Own Name, directed by Kim So-young. And I think 변영주 was a college student when she participated in this movement. And this film, Even Little Grass Has Its Own Name, it's a little short feature about gender discrimination at work, especially office work. And My Children, documentary about, I think I wrote it there somewhere. There's also a documentary called My Children, a documentary about childcare in a poor neighborhood. 변영주 graduated from Ewha Women's University with a major in law. Actually, she didn't major in film. But I think training, as cinematographer when she participated in 바리테오 sort of became a good critical foundation for her as a filmmaker later on. She directed 12 films, including shorts and documentaries. And for filmography and awards, You can type up her name in Naver, and then her film would come up. And after directing Women Being in Asia in 1993, a documentary about the sex trade in Asia, 변영주 started producing documentaries about women who had been forced to become prostitutes or sex slaves for Japanese soldiers during the World War II. The Murmuring, as known as 낮은 목소리, the first one and sequel, was planned from the beginning as a 16mm film for theatrical release. The response was explosive, and the sequels called Habitual Sadness, 1997, and then Habitual Sadness, the sequel, so it's a total of 3 features then, were produced later. So from 2002, Byun started to make feature films. She directed Adore, 2002, based on Chung Kyung-lin's novel, and Flying Boys in 2004. And it was also the 1990s when feminist producers and film organizations appeared. The Women's Film Festival in Seoul, I think I just mentioned when I was talking about Pangnamo, you know, the Mimangin, the widow, was played many years later at Seoul International Women Film Festival. And that particular film festival was founded in 1997. So for the first year screening, they chose to play Bang Nam-mok's work. So it was established in 1997, and since then it has been producing promising female filmmakers and more talents and of course films by them. Next slide. Oh, I skipped that. So I already said it. The things I mentioned were pretty much on this slide. You can go to Wikipedia, or like I said, you can go to Naver and then type up her, look her up with her name, and then you will see her filmography. Next film, next slide, please. After 2000s, I think I said it too, right? 낮은 목소리, okay. Next slide, please. So, we finally talk about now. And this is not exactly now, because the article I have here is from 2017, which is 3 years ago. And it was I excerpted this article from Sight and Sound magazine, especially dedicated to London Korean Film Festival. And for this particular article, I think Darcy Parkett participated. So this is his own writing. I think I'm assuming most of you know who Darcy Parkett is. He's pretty famous film critic, specialized in Korean cinema, and now I think he's more famous as his subtitling work for Parasite. He did a lot of interviews, so you can also look him up. As much as I'm sympathetic with this article, and before I go on, let me read out this article. Okay. Special focus at this year's London Korean Film Festival highlighted a number of exceptional women filmmakers, and it raised a critical problem: uneven playing field for women in cinema. Im Sul-ye, the director of Whittle Forest, told that the films about women, the films directed by women, receive less international exposure than male-centered films. It's true that, as in every country, male directors far outnumber female directors, and so it is unsurprising that the 6 most famous Korean directors mentioned above, and he mentioned above, he mentioned Kim Ji-yoon, Park Chan-wook, Bong Joon-ho, Kim Ki-deok, Hong Sang-soo, and Park Chan-wook, I just said it. Oh, that's 6. So he mentioned them. And 6 most famous Korean directors mentioned above are all male. Even more so when you consider that all 6 debuted in the 1990s, a decade in which women had far fewer opportunities than even today. Indeed, no Korean male directors who debuted in the last 15 years have been ushered into the International Film Festival Network's favored inner circle. Part of the issue may be that both programmers and the audiences at their festivals expect and prefer certain kinds of film out of Asia at the expense of others. It is not to say that they're biased towards male-directed films per se, but there are a large subsection of films in which women film directors enjoy freer reign are less likely to be taken seriously by the film festival establishment. It's also interesting, reading this article, that they always mention those 6, male Korean filmmakers, including Park Chan-wook, Bong Joon-ho, Kim Ki-dong, Hong Sang-soo, blah, blah, blah. But they always, as if there was some sort of, agreement among them, they always exclude the name of Im Sul-lie. Because Im Sul-lie came up with them, and Im Sul-lie was one of those very promising film directors, along with Park Chan-wook, Bong Joon-ho, Hong Sang-soo, when they came out in the 1990s. But now, of course, there's, Park Chan-wook and Bong Joon-ho, especially Bong Joon-ho, Park Chan-wook made incredibly renowned films that won many awards outside of Korea. Maybe that's, I'm pretty sure that's a big contributor. But still, I think it's pretty odd when they forget to mention the name of Im Sul-lie. So, as much as I'm sympathetic with this article, I should say it's very fortunate that things are changing in Korean film industry right now. And things are, to be more exact, improving, though it may seem slow or not really dramatic, noticeable. For example, last year, 47% of the films that were selected by Seoul Independent Film Festival were female. This year, the number went up incredibly to 67%, which is now a lot more than a half. In the commercial film sector, of course, it's an independent, the field of independent cinema. So the story might be a little bit different because there is always more women in the independent cinema than commercial cinema when it comes to the number of female filmmakers. But this year, in the commercial film sector, there was also an increase of films directed by a female filmmaker. This year alone, there was a list of films by women directors, including, next slide, please. Next. Next, please. Including Honest Candidates, directed by Jang Yoo-jung. Lucky Chansil, directed by Kim Cho-hee. Kim Cho-hee used to be assistant director for Hong Sang-soo. And I think Jang Yoo-jung is more well-known, better known for Kim Jong-wook 찾기, Finding Kim Jong-wook. It's about 5 years ago it came out. And An Old Lady, directed by Im Sun-hae, it's a story about literally old lady who's 69 years old, and she gets raped by 20-something-year-old man, and then she sort of struggles to fight the battle. And a French woman Girl, 갈매기, 욕창. These are independent films, but still they were received pretty highly. And 소리도 없이, Voice of Silence, I think it's 홍 의정's debut film, which stars with 유아인 and 유재명. And 내가 죽던 날, The Day I Died, this is the most recent feature directed by a female filmmaker, stars with 김혜수. And I'm pretty sure there will be more at the end of this year, directed by female filmmaker that will be released. So basically the list doesn't end here, and I'm only giving you small sector, a small part of actually what's out there. There are many movies made by women filmmakers released this year, independent and commercial cinema combined. And this is very good news. I'm actually sort of making a book on 임술예. It's going to be published hopefully by 2021 or 2, and it's going to be published by University of Edinburgh. And when the book is finished, it will be the very first English written book on Korean female filmmaker. So hopefully, finger crossed for me, the project goes well. And that 임술예 that we've been talking about whole time, she just finished shooting 교섭. I think its English title should be Negotiation. She actually went to Algeria to shoot the film in the middle of Corona, pandemic. So she got some kind of permit from Korean government, and then she finally was able to finish her film in Algeria. No, actually it's not Algeria, it's Jordan. She went to Jordan with Hwang Jung-min, and I think it also features Hyunbin. There are two major male protagonists, Hwang Jung-min and Hyunbin. And thing about 교섭, it's pretty interesting, and it's something that we've been waiting for because it's a huge blockbuster, very high budget, and this will be very first Korean blockbuster ever directed by female filmmaker. So I can't really wait to watch it. I mean, it's a matter of time. I think they're in post-production, but things are not really good in Korea, especially with theaters. So if Corona gets better, the pandemic situation gets better, we'll be able to watch it in theater in no time. So I can confidently say in short time there will be a load of films made by female and about female that have not been the center of Korean cinema. But I want to say you wait and watch. And thank you for listening.